I extensively covered the Arabs in Ottoman land topic in these videos of mine, but I would like to point at some additional things. First of all, the Ottoman investment into the security of the pilgrimage routes were quite extensive. Fortifications were built all the way to Hejaz and were all repaired and maintained by the Ottomans. The Mamluk monopoly on commodities such as sugar were also removed, allowing more wealth and easier access to products for the people. The Ottoman presence were also felt in other ways: architectural remodeling of the holy places, the rebuilding of minarets of main mosques, the addition of more minarets, the renovation of galleries, the restoration of the Kaaba. All of these things were felt as far as Mecca and Medina. What is also quite unknown is the intellectual extent of the Ottoman Empire. It is popular to claim that the Ottomans were some backwater, but to quote the author here, Cairo, together with Istanbul, Damascus and Salonika, formed an Ottoman quadrangle of a shared Mediterranean learned culture. Scholars, pilgrims, diplomats and merchants from as far west as the Atlantic sea borders and as far east as the Caucasus, Jews and Christians as well as Muslims crossed paths within and beyond the Ottoman frontier. Many leading Ottoman scholars, scientists and physicians received their training in Egypt. The foundation of learning was the classical texts of figures like Ibn Sina, whose works informed scholars throughout the Mediterranean basin. This was extended to science in general as well, the author notes. Scientific assumptions and research agendas and manuscripts and books readily cross political and religious boundaries. Book dealers played an underappreciated role in the cultural exchange. At markets in Istanbul, Aleppo, Cairo and other major cities, they supplied buyers both Ottoman and non-Ottoman. Evliya Çelebi wrote that the book market outside the covered bazaar in Istanbul had 60 shops and employed 300 people. Another operated at the courtyard of the conqueror's mosque. In Cairo, the book market at Al-Azhar had 20 shops. Either way, the scholarly work was not only confined to Anatolia, but it was spread along the Anatolian Silk Road. So this was not some bookshops that only operated in specific places, but extended all the way to and from the Safavid. However, Cairo in particular was the center of physical science and medicine, whereas Damascus was center of philosophy and theology. Mecca and Medina were also international centers of learning. Ibn Arabi studied in Medina. Many like-minded people went to these cities to stay for months and years. Another such example would be the influential Indian scholar Shah Wali Allah of Delhi, who studied in Medina in the 1730s. To give an example from Damascus, Mullah Mahmud al-Kurdi taught for more than 50 years in Damascus and introduced broad Persian scholarships and method grounded in logic, semantic and rhetoric. And contrary to common misconception, this intellectual exchange did not attract people within the Ottoman or Islamic realm alone, but also from the Christian world. The author notes, Protestants and Roman Catholic scholars from the northwestern Mediterranean lands also sometimes made their way to Ottoman centers of learning. Men such as Pietro della Valle of Rome, Joseph Solomon del Medico, a Jew who had studied at the University of Padua, John Greaves and Edward Pocock and many others spent years traveling in the Ottoman Empire and further east. They did not think that medieval Islam had merely preserved for their benefit the science of Greco-Roman classical antiquity. These works that were provided by the Ottoman realm were not just some 100 manuscripts here and there either. Galip Çelebi, an Ottoman scholar, wrote a comprehensive book in the early to mid-17th century containing more than 20 works spanning several genres, from guiding principles to encyclopedias of literary, biography and bibliography. It contains, through the author, more than 10,000 authors and 15,000 titles in all fields, including poetic anthologies and compilations, besides science, religion, language, politics, history and more, and over 300 essays on fields of science and scholarship. In summary, the Ottomans, or the Ottoman realm, was much more active in the scholarly and cultural field than one would assume. These scholarly activities were not just state-sponsored, but also appeared publicly and independently from the Ottoman dynasty. The first in Istanbul appeared in 1661, which was the Köprülü Library. More appeared throughout the realm, even in faraway fortresses. The library in Istanbul, however, contained 2,773 volumes, mostly manuscripts, except for 180 printed books. It wasn't just books from the Islamic realm either, but Christian books were also translated. Among the printed books, the 1568 edition of Andrea Mattioli, Italian commentary of the Materia Medicea, several European geographies, including the Atlas Novus or the Atlas Geographica by Matteo Leuter from Augsburg in 1720, were among the translated works. A few historic events that I would like to point at and that are not really known are as followed. The Ottomans actually invaded Italy under Fatih Sultan Mehmed, but contrary to popular misconception, this wasn't done with the intent to conquer Rome, but much more to prevent Venice aiding the Mamluks. Otranto, as an example, was conquered and held for several years before it was abandoned. In retrospective, this was entirely unnecessary, since the Ottomans would conquer the entity of the Mamluks in a couple of decades down the line. There are, however, YouTube videos out there making it sound like Italy was some kind of wall the Ottomans were unable to climb over. Corsairs operated from various islands such as Rhodes and constantly attacked and harassed commercial ships that were operating between Istanbul and Cairo. You often hear how evil and brutal the Ottomans were because of how the Maghreb Corsairs acted, but people quickly forget that this was not one-sided. This wasn't limited to various islands either. Cossacks actually plundered Anatolia. To quote the author here, Cossack sailors had delivered a shock not long before, crossing the Black Sea to sack Sinop and sailing right into the Bosporus, plundering the villages along the shore a few miles north of Istanbul. Austria was at one point a tributary of the Ottomans. After the war over Hungary between the Ottomans and Austria, Hungary was partitioned between the two and Austria had to pay annual tribute to the Ottomans. Before the Second Siege of Vienna, a mufti gave a fatwa forbidding an attack on Austria because Austria was willing to renew the most recent peace signed in 1664. It is ironic how this was disregarded and ended in one of the most significant defeats in Ottoman history. In 1776, it wasn't just Muslims that were uprooted from Crimea, but also Ottoman Greeks, Armenians, and Georgian communities. This was done by the Russian crown with the intent to make Crimea as dependent on Russia as possible. The lack of manpower that was created was replaced by Greeks from the Aegean Islands or the coast of Anatolia who supported the Russian assault on the Ottoman navy. When the Muscovites were gaining more and more power, the Ottomans wanted to wage war and establish a Don-Volga canal. Due to the defeat in 1569, this was never attempted. It is still crazy how such a plan was thought to be feasible in 1569.